Imagine this. You have recently undergone a major operation and spent many weeks in the hospital, battling through the pain and weariness that you experience. You go back to your house under the impression that you will be greeted with open arms, only to discover that everything you know will no longer be there. The loss of your family, your house, and your life is a terrible thing. Have you ever had the experience of having everything you've worked for suddenly taken away from you? Is it true that nothing is safe this day? Actually, it is exactly what took place with me. Continue reading because this tale will take you through a fight for what is rightfully mine, as well as betrayal and grief. And believe me when I say that you won't want to miss what comes after this. I had been in the hospital for what seemed like an eternity, 3 weeks that were extremely long. I was fatigued and fighting fevers as a result of complications from my hip surgery, yet I was finally going to be able to return home. Even though my body was feeble, I was prepared. With my husband Anthony, I was eager to return to the house that I had labored so diligently to acquire over the course of the years. We lived our lives in our home. Over the course of 30 years, we made it our home, renovated it, and transformed it into a place that is replete with memories. We worked on making it into something lovely by planting flowers, painting the walls, and building it. I was looking forward to seeing the roses that Anthony had planted near the walkway, which continue to blossom each year without fail. My heart fell, however, when the taxi drove up to the curb. The home was silent, and the door that it was familiar with stood there as if it were a stranger. When I walked through that door, I had envisaged being greeted by the warmth of my family. I had always pictured that situation. Instead, what I found when I arrived at the door was Richard, my one and only son, standing there, but not in the manner that I had anticipated. His face was expressionless, icy, and aloof. It was as if he were someone else. In the background, his wife, Veronica, appeared to be in the same state of disconnection. "Do you know what's going on, Richard?" I inquired as I attempted to move forward, anticipating that he would give me a hug as a greeting. The man did not move. Rather than that, he sealed off the entrance. The tone of his voice was stern as he stated, "You should not have come today. Tomorrow we were anticipating your arrival." With a sense of bewilderment, I moved closer. "What exactly is going on?" I inquired as I felt a lump forming in the back of my throat. Richard's eyes were unreadable and uninteresting. "While you were in the hospital, everything went through a transition. You are no longer the owner of this house. You are going to have to look for a new place to call home." I became numb. It looked as though the world around me had stopped moving. I was unable to process the information that I was hearing. Was this house, which had been our home and the place where I had brought him up, no longer mine? I felt as though a wave had swept over me. "Please explain what you mean, Richard. The plans were made." "Yes, this is my house." Despite the fact that my heart was racing, I said, "I worked for this home." At that moment, Veronica took a courageous stride forward, her face icy and her blonde hair well styled. Following that, I witnessed something that caused my stomach to turn. To celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary, Anthony had presented me with a pair of emerald earrings, which she was wearing. It was with that phony kindness in her voice that she addressed Isabella, saying, "We've already packed your things down. They can be found in the garage in boxes. We'll be able to deliver them to wherever you are staying." What about my belongings? When I repeated it, I was unsure whether or not I even understood what was going on. "This is unfathomable. You are unable to manage this, Richard. Permit me to occupy your home." Richard's expression remained unchanged. As he stood there, he appeared to be nobody. "It is already known that the residence has been moved. Because of the law, it is no longer yours." Although I could feel my legs becoming weaker, I did not give up. "Can you transfer?" It was with a voice that was shaking with rage and amazement that I stated, "I never signed anything." With a tone that became increasingly icy, Richard responded, "That is exactly what power of attorney is for, Mom. You signed documents while you were in the hospital," the doctor said. "You have given me complete authority over everything." As if I had been punched in the gut, the words struck me. At one point, I was unable to take a breath. I had put my faith in him. I had signed the documents without giving them much thought. I was concerned about the operation, and I had not read anything. In the past, I had put my faith in my own son to make choices for me. I had no idea that he would take advantage of that trust to steal everything that I had worked so hard to achieve. "You deceived me," I said over my lip. It was difficult for me to catch my own voice. Richard did not show any panic. "It's finished, Mom," she said. "Doing what is best for everyone is what we are doing. If you are by yourself, the house is too much for you to handle." The anger that was growing up inside of me was palpable. You do not have the right to decide that. Yes, this is my house. There is no way that you can just take it away from me. There was nothing I could do about it, however. Richard was the one who had made the choice for me. Raymond Sterling and Claudia Sterling, Veronica's parents, were standing behind him, observing with eyes that were expressionless and critical. Raymond, who was always tall and imposing, cast a short glance in my direction and dismissed me. He said it in a tone that was unmoved. "I'm sorry that it came to this." But the expression on his face conveyed a different message. This was not about family. The topic at hand was completely unrelated to that. Having no idea what to say, I stood there in silence. My mind was racing. What was going on in that situation? How could my son cause me to feel this way? "This is against the law," I finally muttered, scarcely raising my voice above a whisper. "You can't just grab me and take me home? You are aware that this is criminal." Richard proclaimed, "It's finished. Don't make this more difficult. Just come to terms with it and go on." Although the words were painful, something within me finally snapped. My home was not the only thing that was at stake here. It was about losing everything, including my family and my trust in others. I had devoted my entire life to raising Richard and teaching him the difference between right and wrong, and here he was telling me to simply accept what he had done. It was an excessive amount. At the same time that my voice was steady yet hard, I said, "I won't make it easy for you." I turned my back on the taxi and began walking in the direction of the taxi that had been waiting on the curb. During that day, I believed that I had lost everything, including my home, the love of my son, and my trust in my own family. However, as I climbed into that taxi, I became aware that this was not the conclusion. This was not the end. Rather, it was just now. The real battle was just getting started, and I had no intention of giving in to the challenge. But before I could do that, I needed to regain my strength. It was necessary for me to get my thoughts organized. To put it another way, I did just that. Not only was it about regaining possession of my home, but it was also about regaining control of my life. Upon my arrival at the hotel, I had the sensation of being a stranger in my own skin. The space was uncluttered and uncomplicated, serving as a temporary haven away from the madness of the day. The weight of everything that had occurred hit me all at once, and I dropped my suitcase on the bed. I felt like I was completely overwhelmed. Even though my heart was hurting, I was able to think with a chilly and unyielding clarity. As a result of this, I was not going to cry. They were not going to be able to prevail. I took a few long breaths before sitting down at the small desk and removing my phone from its case. I was no longer terrified, despite the fact that my hands were shaking slightly. I was totally resolute. After bringing up the contact list, I selected Gloria's name and tapped on it. For the past 4 decades, ever since we were in college together, Gloria Evans had been my closest friend. We had been through a lot together, including the death of marriages, the upbringing of children, and the development of jobs, but nothing could have adequately prepared either of us for this. She was a force to be reckoned with in the legal profession. After the phone rang for the second time, Gloria grabbed it up and answered it. She spoke to Isabella in a tone that was calm but contained a trace of concern. "Are you okay?" she said. I responded to Gloria with a voice that was still shaking, saying, "I'm not sure what's going on. However, I will make the necessary adjustments. I simply require your assistance." I was able to get a sense of relief from her voice. "The situation is not unique to you. What are the things that we need to do?" My tone became more authoritative as I stated, "I need you here. I need your assistance in figuring out how they were able to do this to me, specifically how Richard was able to accomplish this. It is imperative that I comprehend everything, every action that they took. Afterwards, we are going to put a stop to them. When it comes to me, they are not taking anything else away." "I'll be there in an hour," Gloria responded, her voice resonating with a sense of determination. We'll figure this out later. Keep your chin up. The situation is going to be resolved for you." Despite my mind was racing, I ended the call. The time was passing quickly. It was necessary for me to go ahead of them. Trying to figure out how my own son, Richard, had become involved in the scam was a challenge for me. It was not enough for him to betray me. He had also become a vehicle for something that was much more significant than I could have ever imagined. The house was no longer the only thing at stake here. This had to do with something far more sinister. When I sat at the window of the hotel room and looked out at the city below, I had the impression that it was more of a prison than a safe haven. As the sun began to set, I experienced a peculiar sense of tranquility that washed over me simultaneously. In no way, shape, or form was there tranquility. Nonetheless, it was something. At that moment, there was a lull in the activity. I was able to observe that Gloria had already been diligently working when she came. I was aware that she was experiencing a storm on the inside, but she came in with a small briefcase, maintaining the same level of professionalism that she always does. The two of us did not engage in pleasantries. Her approach was direct and to the point. "As of right now, I have already begun to investigate the transfer documents." In a calm and collected tone, she stated, "I don't think it's necessary to tell you that this is going to be a fight. However, I will tell you that there is more to this conversation than just your house. This is very profound." I nodded, aware of the significance of what she had spoken. "I was aware of it. But Gloria, I need to know everything there is to know. I need to know how they were able to take my life, my house, and my money. I need to know how they accomplished this. It is imperative that I comprehend everything that they have done." A number of files were retrieved by Gloria when she sat down. Here is what I have discovered up to this point. A paper trail has been left behind that does not make any sense. The manner in which they are utilizing your signature is also a form of manipulation. The planning for this has been going on for some time. They have stolen your power of attorney and used it to their advantage. Whenever she proceeded, I experienced a shiver that ran down my spine. However, the power of attorney is not the only thing at play here. Exactly what they are doing with your assets is the issue at hand. During the time that you were hospitalized, a number of significant withdrawals were made from your accounts. Even though there is no evidence that you gave permission for the money to be transferred, they were nevertheless moving it around. To add insult to injury, when I examined the papers, I discovered that there were signatures on documents that did not correspond to yours. As I attempted to take in the significance of what she had said, I closed my eyes. I had put my faith in Richard. My son was his name. Without realizing that he would exploit the faith I had placed in him against me, I had signed those documents out of complete trust. I murmured, more to myself than to Gloria, I never thought he could do something like this. I was more or less referring to myself. However, don't you think it's not only him? Once again, it is Veronica, as well as her parents. "No," Gloria responded, her tone of voice acrimonious. "They are all complicit in the scheme. Therefore, we now have the evidence. Nevertheless, we must move quickly. It is likely that they will cover their traces if we do not act promptly. There is more to this than simply regaining your home and property. This is about bringing to light the fraudulent activities that they have been conducting. It is imperative that we pursue each and every one of them." My thoughts were racing as I stood up. "Yes, we will. This is not something that I am going to let them get away with. No, not after I've put forth so much effort to achieve everything. In light of the fact that my family has taken from me." I was the subject of Gloria's gaze for a brief moment, and her eyes were filled with resolve. "Of course, Isabella, you have the correct frame of mind. In spite of this, we need to exercise caution. It is imperative that we collect the evidence and make certain that they do not have the opportunity to fight back." I gave a nod in agreement. "I am prepared. Let us get this done." The storm was imminent, and I was prepared to face it when it arrived. But I wasn't going to go into battle by myself. I had a strategy with Gloria, and we were going to bring down everyone who had been involved in this. We were going to pull this off. I knew that the path that lay ahead of me would not be simple, but I was ready to do whatever it took to reclaim what was rightfully mine. And until justice was done, I was not going to give up until I had done so. If you want to know what happens next, you should stay tuned because believe me, you won't want to miss it. Evidence was available to us. Every single item that had been done behind my back, including the false documents, the unauthorized transactions, and everything else. However, I was aware that merely possessing the evidence was not sufficient. For me to be able to put an end to this, I had to make certain that the system was aware of what they had done and that the truth could not be concealed. During the subsequent several days, Gloria and I put in a lot of hard work, delving deeper into each and every document, bank statement, and transfer. The more information we gathered, the more convoluted the story appeared to be. More than just stealing my house or emptying my bank accounts, it was about more than that. In contrast, this was about something far more significant, something that had been developing for a number of years. It had always been clear to me that my son had some shortcomings. I was completely shaken to my very core by the information that I discovered about Richard during this research. He had always been a good boy, or at least that was what I had believed about him. On the other hand, as I pieced together everything, it became very evident that Veronica and her parents had been manipulating him for a considerable amount of experience. They had taken advantage of his frailties and his feeling of hopelessness in order to entangle him in their web of lies and deceit. During the time that I was sitting in Gloria's office, browsing through the papers, I noticed something in one of the documents that caught my attention specifically. There was a string of emails that Veronica and Raymond Sterling exchanged with one another, and they were sent several months before I even went to the hospital. The preparation for this had been going on for quite some time. They detailed in the emails how they would seize control of my residence, how they would persuade Richard into signing over the power of attorney, and how they would get away with it without me ever recognizing what was going on if they were successful. During the time that I was reading through their ideas, I experienced a wave of nausea. They had been playing a game, and they had taken everything that I had worked for while using my son as a pawn in the game themselves. Moreover, to make matters even more difficult, it became abundantly evident that this was not only about money. It was their intention to compel me to move into a nursing facility where I would be confined and unable to interfere with their intended course of action. While I was sitting there reading the emails, Gloria kept her gaze fixed on me. "Isabella," she mentioned in a low voice, "this is more profound than we had anticipated. They were not only interested in your residence. Having power over you was their goal. They desired to eradicate you from existence. My mind was blown by the news. Not only had they chosen me as a victim, but they had also targeted me as someone they could get rid of. Where is Richard?" Regardless of whether or not he was aware of it, he had become their fellow conspirator. On the other hand, there was still something that I could not comprehend. At least, that was why I believed Richard to have been devoted to me during his entire life. Could he have allowed them to treat me in such a manner? Was he so oblivious to the fact that he was developing into what he was becoming because of his dread of Veronica and her parents? Could it be that he was so eager to get their approval that he was willing to disobey everything that I had instructed him to do? Richard was the one I called after picking up the phone. His voice was trembling as he answered the phone after the first ring. "Mom," he replied, "I was completely unaware of all of this. I solemnly swear that I did not." "If that is the case, then why did you do it?" My voice was tense with emotion when I asked the question. "Why did you choose to sign those documents? I don't understand why you took everything to me." A lengthy pause occurred on the other end of the line before he resumed his conversation with the caller. "It was difficult for me to comprehend what they were doing, Mom. I was under the impression that I was assisting. If I supported them, I believed that I was acting in a morally responsible manner. Now, however, I am able to see everything." The remarks were painful to hear, but I was at a loss for words of my own. If only I could have believed him. The boy that I had brought up was not fully lost to this system, and I wanted to believe that he was with me. However, it was difficult. The betrayal was difficult to look beyond, and it was much more difficult to believe that the guy who had been my little son had taken decisions that were so extremely detrimental. What I said was, "I trusted you," and my voice was breaking. "The trust that I placed in you, Richard, was unwavering. Moreover, you allowed them to take everything that I had. I am very sorry, Mom." Richard responded, I really am, with his voice scarcely audible above a whisper. I was completely unaware of what they were doing. But now that I am aware of the truth, I want to put everything in their proper place. If only I could have believed him. Indeed, I did it. Nevertheless, the reality was that it was not going to be that simple. Once destroyed trust was not something that could be readily restored to its previous state. It was unclear to me where we were going to go from here, but I was certain of one thing: this was not yet over. The decision was made by Gloria and I to take all we had with us and go to the authorities. Even though the evidence was strong, I was aware that it would not be simple. It was well known that the Sterlings were influential and had connections. This wasn't going to be a straightforward case at all. However, I was obligated to carry it out. It was imperative that I put up a fight not only for myself, but also for the entire group of individuals whom they had exploited. Other people, including myself, had been targeted by the Sterlings, and they had been tricked and controlled by them. There were other people out there who had been targeted. I was not going to give them the opportunity to get away with it. Over the course of the following few days, we dedicated ourselves to working with law enforcement to organize everything. I was aware that it would not be a quick process. None of these things ever existed. On the other hand, with Gloria's assistance, we were making headway, and as we came closer to the truth, I could feel a sense of determination growing up inside of me. My fight for my home was no longer the only thing I was doing. I fought for justice, not only for myself, but also for Richard and for everyone else that they had wronged. In spite of this, just when we believed that we had everything under control, a startling revelation completely flipped everything upside down. My mind was blown by the news. The reality was far more terrible than we had projected it to be. Stay here with me because the next event that happened will completely alter everything. Something that I discovered will blow your mind. Take my word for it, this is not yet over. A single phone call was the beginning of everything. Gloria had been working frantically to collect all of the evidence, searching over every financial record, every email, and every document that we could get our hands on before beginning her investigation. As the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, became involved, I was aware that it was only a matter of time before the puzzle pieces began to fit together. Nevertheless, I was not prepared for the information that Gloria was going to share with me. During our conversation that morning, she called me and said, "It's worse than we thought." It was impossible for me to ignore the sense of urgency that was present in her voice, despite the fact that it was normally quiet. "I require your presence at the office," I said. "We have discovered something." My mind was racing as I made my way to the office, so I grabbed my cane and headed there. If all that we had already discovered was bad, what could possibly be worse? In spite of the fact that I was aware that the Sterlings were deeply involved in their strategy, I couldn't shake the sensation that there was something else, something that they hadn't disclosed yet. As soon as I came into Gloria's office, I noticed that her eyes were completely filled with stress. As soon as I sat down, she pushed the stack of documents that she had in front of her toward me. She had a pile of materials in front of her. "These are the emails that we discovered," she replied, maintaining a steady but strained tone in her voice. "Veronica was the one who dispatched them, but they were not only concerned with the house. Isabella, these are emails to plan for the future. They have been planning something that is considerably more significant, something that is significantly more hazardous than anything we could have ever imagined." While I was reading through the emails, I caught a glimpse of the screen and felt my heart sinking. Additionally, Veronica and Raymond had been in communication with a number of real estate developers discussing the possibility of purchasing additional houses in our residential area. It wasn't just that, though. They were using my financial information to obtain loans and make investments under my name, debts that I had never authorized. They were also using my name to make investments. My voice was hardly audible above a whisper as I spoke to Gloria, saying, "This isn't just fraud anymore. This is an entire network," the speaker said. "They have been making preparations to take control of the entire block." Gloria displayed a gloomy nod. "It's not the end of it. I've been in contact with the Financial Crimes Unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and they've been looking into the Sterlings for some time now. But what we were unaware of was the extent to which their activity proceeded. They are connected to a number of other fraudulent real estate deals that have taken place across the country, and they have been employing the same strategies, which include taking advantage of elderly homeowners, falsifying documents, and draining their bank accounts. I felt nauseous. To my surprise, the puzzle was beginning to come together in a way that I had not anticipated. It wasn't simply me that they had targeted. My entire community, including my neighbors and the folks I had known for years, was the focus of their targeted attacks. They were constructing their empire by utilizing us, specifically me. The volume of my voice increased as I stated, "We cannot allow them to get away with this. Gloria, these people need to be stopped. We are going to have to take action." There was a mixture of determination and concern in Gloria's eyes as she glanced at me. "Yes, we are. At this point, we have a strong argument, but we need to move quickly. It is possible that they will vanish or cover their traces if we do not take prompt action. It is imperative that we strike them where it hurts." In my statement, I stated, "I want to go straight to the FBI. I want them to be taken into custody. It is no longer acceptable for me to wait." After a brief moment of hesitation, Gloria finally gave a nod. "Let me make the phone call. Isabella, however, it is imperative that we be ready. It's going to get a little messy here." The Sterling family possesses a great deal of influence, and they are not going to give up without going up a battle. The feeling of a new sense of purpose began to settle over me as I got up. "I'm ready. Come on, let's take them out." The subsequent few days were filled with a flurry of activities. We collaborated closely with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, presenting them with all of the material that we had obtained. Despite the fact that the Sterlings were previously the subject of an investigation, they were finally able to take action after receiving the new material that we presented. It was impossible for me to shake the impression that someone was watching me. Every time I went outside, I was aware that people were watching me. It seemed as though they were aware of something that was going to happen and were making preparations for it. Veronica, Raymond, and Claudia were all keeping a low profile, but I was aware that they were anticipating their next move and were getting ready to make it. Where is Richard? It was still a mystery to him, and he had no idea what we had in store for him. It was no longer simply the Sterlings that I needed to be concerned about either. Once again, it was Richard. After such a lengthy period of time during which they had corrupted my own kid, I was no longer certain of where his allegiances lay. It was imperative that I meet with him. Hearing him say it and hearing him explain himself was necessary for me. In what capacity had he participated? In what way could he have done anything like this to me, to his own family? Unbearable was the remorse that had been looming over me for quite some time. My entire life had been devoted constructing a house, bringing up my son, and putting my faith in him. At this point, I was no longer certain of his identity. It was decided that the meeting with Richard would take place in a neutral setting, which was a tiny cafe in the city. As I made my way to the table once I had entered the room, my cane created a tapping sound on the floor. The eyes of Richard were turned downward, and his hands were folded in front of him. Richard was already seated there. He appeared worn out and exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. In a tone that was soft and almost aloof, he addressed his mother. I had no idea things would progress to this point. This is something that I never imagined would happen. Taking a seat across from him, I found my heart weighed down by a variety of feelings. "Please explain what you mean, Richard. Did you not know that it would take it to this point? You were one of its members. The papers were signed by you. You gave them everything," they said. His eyes avoided mine as he jerked back and forth. "I was under the impression that I was on the correct path, Mom. I was under the impression that I was guarding you. They stated that it was only a temporary situation. They advised us to sell the house and then proceed to purchase a more suitable property. For what it was, I failed to recognize it. Because of what Veronica and her father had promised me, I was unable to see clearly. At first, I believed that they had the answers, but now I can see that they were actually the ones. I was looking for the boy I had known in the past, and I glanced at him. I was the one who had come to me for assistance when he was unable to find a solution to a problem, and I was the one who had shared laughter with me on the porch. You believe that is sufficient, don't you? What do you mean by that as an excuse?" Despite the fact that his voice was shaking, Richard continued, "I didn't want to hurt you, Mom. I was apprehensive. I was unsure about what I should do. Then again, the reality is now clear to me. I moved closer to him, the gaze of my eyes fixed on him. Is that the truth? Richard, what is the truth? You had been aware of what they were doing the entire time until now. You have been a co-part of it, a betrayal on your part. It was clear that he was feeling guilty. I am aware of that. In addition, I apologize. There is, however, more. I came across something that has the potential to modify everything. Why are you bringing up such a point? I inquired, my heart pounding rapidly. Richard whispered, I discovered a collection of documents as he walked away. Documents that demonstrate that the Sterlings were not only interested in your residence, it was more that they desired. It was their intention to seize everything, including each and every piece of property in the residential area. They had every intention of bringing all of us to shame. I was unable to inhale or exhale. What is it? They intended to completely wipe out the entire neighborhood, right? Richard slowly nodded his head. It is true. They had planned for all of this to happen, and I was unable to notice it because I was blind. I had just about reached the point where I believed I had found the worst of it when Richard divulged something that completely blew my mind. The reality was much more sinister than I could have ever dared to anticipate. My house was not the only thing that the Sterlings were pursuing. They were after everything, too. As of this moment, it was imperative that I ensure that their plot was thwarted before it was too late. You won't be able to find the words to describe what happens in the following section of this story. The following events are going to blow your mind. It was like a freight train when Richard made his confession to me. Coming to the understanding that the Sterlings were not just wanting my house, but that they intended to destroy my entire community, it was nearly too much for me to grasp. It was difficult for me to believe that something so sneaky had been going on right in front of my eyes, not to mention that my own kid had been involved in those activities. In spite of the fact that he had never been the kind of person to cause harm to another person, his anxiety and his desire to win over Veronica and her parents had clouded his judgment. As I attempted to regain my composure, I drew a breath in deeply. So, what should we do now? I inquired, my voice scarcely audible above a whisper. What are we going to do with this information? Although his eyes were filled with remorse, Richard gazed at me. I'm not sure, Mom, I said. Nevertheless, I'm not going to continue to allow them to get away with it. Whatever it takes, I will do whatever it takes to put things right. I slowly nodded my head, even though I didn't believe him completely. The purpose of this was not to make things right for me. Rather, it was to expose everything that they had done to do harm to a large number of individuals. Other people, including my neighbors and acquaintances, who had been targeted by the Sterlings in the same way that I had been. Over the course of several months, or even years, they had been plotting this, and now it was time to put an end to it. While I was standing up and walking around the room, I made the statement, we need to go to the authorities. The scope of this extends beyond simply us. The purpose of this is to safeguard everyone who they have harmed. The fact that they continue to get away with this is unacceptable. After a little period of silence, Richard finally gave a slight nod. You are correct. You have my support, Mom. Whatever it takes, I will offer my testimony. I wasn't at all certain that I could put my full faith in him. There was, however, no room for uncertainty. It was necessary to put a halt to the Sterlings, and the only way to fulfill this objective was to expose them for everything that they were. This wasn't just about regaining what had been taken from me, it was also about putting an end to a criminal organization that had been preying on vulnerable people for a number of years. Over the course of the following several days, we collaborated with the FBI in order to get ready for the ultimate encounter. In addition to assisting law enforcement in organizing the evidence that we had obtained, Gloria maintained frequent communication with them. When we discovered more, the facts became even more shocking than they were before. The Sterlings had contacts in just about every industry, including banking, real estate, and legal services. All of these individuals collaborated to establish a fake empire that was founded on deception and deceit. Nevertheless, as the days went by, I started to feel the pressure of the situation crushing down on me harder and harder. By this point, it was no longer merely a battle for my house. During this struggle, I fought for everything that I had worked so hard for in my life. My family and my town were being torn apart by those who were just concerned with making money because they saw nothing but dollar signs. There was no way I was going to let that occur. I would not do that. A day earlier than I had anticipated, the day of the raid arrived. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, local police enforcement, and even a couple of my neighbors who had been directly impacted by the scam that the Sterlings had devised were all involved in the coordination of everything. We were prepared. Before things changed, I stood outside my house and took one last look at it before it was gone forever. The home that Anthony and I had constructed, the location where I had brought up Richard, the home that had once been brimming with joy and affection, all of these things were once present. A war for justice, a fight for what was properly mine, was taking place at this very moment. It was the location of a conflict. Are you certain about this? Gloria inquired when she was standing next to me. Despite the fact that she had been at my side during the entire process, she was able to recognize the impact that this had made on me. With a clear expression of determination in my eyes, I nodded. I have waited for far too long. It is enough that they have taken from me. It is time to reclaim it at this point. Then a heartbeat. The agents surrounded the house as they went in fast, their uniforms blazing as they did so. It was possible for me to hear the sound of doors being kicked down, as well as the yells of law enforcement officers as they proceeded around the property. Next, I caught a glimpse of them, the Sterlings. Veronica, Raymond, and Claudia are there. They were completely unaware of the events that were about to unfold when Veronica spotted me standing there, observing as the agents took control of the situation. Her eyes widened in surprise. Despite the fact that she could not speak, I could see the anguish in her eyes. She was aware that this was the conclusion. All of the things that she and her family had fought so hard for came to an end. I was the one who had brought them down, and she was aware of this fact. I addressed it with a chilly tone. You thought you could take everything away from me for yourself, but you failed to underestimate me. You grossly miscalculated the power of the individuals that you believed you could exert authority on. It was difficult for Veronica to speak since the words were stuck in her throat. In silence, Raymond and Claudia stood behind her, their faces displaying a pale appearance. The game had come to an end, and they were aware of it. It didn't take long for the investigation to get underway. The evidence that we had obtained in conjunction with the testimony that Richard had provided was more than sufficient to guarantee that the Sterlings would never again cause harm to another individual. In addition to being accused of elder abuse and fraud, Raymond was also charged with conspiracy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, continued to examine the full scope of the operation that Claudia and Veronica were involved in, and they were hauled into custody for their participation in the scam. In the case of Richard, he was going to be held accountable for his involvement in the scam, but he had demonstrated real regret for his actions. I was unsure whether or not I would ever be able to forgive him, but I was aware that he was making an effort to put things in order. Even though he still had a long way to go, at least he was heading in the right direction at this point. After a few weeks had passed and the dust had cleared, I found myself sitting on the porch of my house once more. The roses that Anthony had planted were once again flowering, and the gentle petals of the roses served as a powerful reminder of the love that we had shared. It was entirely different. Nothing could ever be the same again. However, it was once again mine. On that particular occasion, Gloria arrived at my house carrying a tiny box with her. My eyes were drawn to the framed family portrait that had been hanging on the wall of our living room for many years as I opened it. She appeared to be smiling as she set it down on the table. With a sweet voice, she whispered, "You've come a long way. The fact that you have fought for what is rightfully yours demonstrates both your strength and your grace." Upon looking at the portrait, I noticed that the faces of Anthony and Richard were looking directly at me. Despite the fact that I didn't have all the answers, I had nonetheless gained some knowledge from this adventure. Despite the fact that I had experienced loss and betrayal, I had realized that there was still a feeling of optimism. Even yet, there was still a way to proceed. In a voice that was thick with passion, I continued, "I would not have been able to accomplish this without you. Gloria, you have been my rock," she said. With a pleasant smile, her eyes lit up. "Both of us have been through a lot before. However, Isabella, you have already won this battle. It was a battle for your family and your house, and you emerged victorious. The voyage that was full of betrayal, grief, and ultimately justice has finally come to an end. With that, you have reached the conclusion of the journey. I will tell you, however, that although the fight for my life and my home was a challenging one, it was not the end of the road. This experience has left me with emotional scars, lessons learned, and connections that were put to the test. All of these things remain with me, and I have gained a great deal of knowledge along the road. However, the reality is that regaining what was rightfully mine was about more than simply the house. There was more to it than simply regaining control of the situation, the money, or even the property themselves. At a time when everything appeared to be lost, it was about standing up. Examining the expression of betrayal, recognizing the anguish it caused, and making the decision that I would not be a victim were all part of the process. That is the true success in this moment. In addition, if you have ever been in a circumstance in which you felt as though the entire world was conspiring against you, in which it appeared as though everything had been taken away from you, I hope that my story may serve as a reminder to you that you too possess the potential to recover your power. I am aware that my road was not an easy one, and I am not yet finished with it. There is still more work to be done in terms of healing, more lessons to be learned, and more trials to experience. However, I will not be backing down. Similarly, you shouldn't do it. There are moments when you feel as though you are being left behind by life because it has a habit of throwing curveballs at you. For me, however, this experience has taught me a very crucial lesson. Your resilience is greater than any obstacle you may face. If you are still viewing this, it indicates that you are present with me, and I want you to know that you are not the only one who is experiencing this. One can always find a way to move forward. Moreover, the most effective thing you can do is to continue moving in the direction of it. Now, if you have discovered something in this narrative that struck a chord with you, whether it be the struggle to protect your home, the betrayal of someone you trusted, or the trek to achieve justice, I need your assistance. Click the like button down below if you've made it this far in the article. I am extremely grateful for your support, which serves as a source of inspiration for me to continue sharing with you more of these stories, these lessons, and these instances of resilience. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. In addition, make sure that the notifications are turned on so that you do not miss any of these stories. In the event that you have ever been confronted with a difficulty that appeared to be insurmountable, you are aware of the significance of having someone to share it with. Because of this, I would like for you to accompany me on this adventure. Let's continue to make progress at the same pace. Also, don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're viewing from. Offer your comments on this story, or let me know if you've ever been the victim of a betrayal that you had to overcome. I would like to find out from you. Also, if you believe that this tale can be of assistance to someone who is going through anything comparable, you should tell them about it. Let's work together to build a community of people who are resilient enough to triumph over any challenge that may come their way.